Early morning seminary teachers. Dear friends, there is a throne in heaven for you.
Welcome to Seminary Teachers Helping Seminary Teachers, the podcast where we share ideas, tools, and encouragement to strengthen your teaching and bless your students. Each episode will explore practical tips, inspired resources, and real experiences from the classroom, so you can feel supported and confident in your calling. Whether you're new to teaching or a seasoned instructor, we're here to help each other teach with power and joy.
All right, welcome back, teachers. We almost got the team back together, almost got the band back together. Nikki may or may not jump on, depending on where she is in the airport at the moment. But I don't. We were just talking off camera. Last week was a heavy week, and it to be a holiday week. If we didn't teach, I had states that didn't have classes Monday and Tuesday, so they have Wednesday, Thursday to cover sections 130, 131, and 132. Holy smokes. I don't normally say this, but if you need to go back and maybe clarify some things, this week may be a good week to do that, because there's, it seems like we went really heavy to really light. So just looking at the week, you get two bites at the apple of section 133, and then 134, which is pretty straightforward. And then we do a life prep lesson on self-reliance, so that you can help other people become be self-reliant, so you can help others. And then an assess your learning, right? Anything we want to quickly say about assess your learning, because we probably won't get back to it.
Yeah, just don't skip
it. Did you just say do it?
I said don't skip it, and he said do it.
Yeah, be paying attention. This is one of those things that your classes, every student needs to do this to earn credit. So probably a good time to audit your records and see if you got any students that haven't done it yet, and make an intentional effort to get them there, right? Okay, we good with that?
Easy.
Anything you want to say about self-reliance life prep, so we just spend the time talking about scripture?
just remember the 3 P's, right? The principle and the practice. This isn't an opportunity for you to tell students how to be self-reliant. This is an opportunity for you to lead them through an exercise where they can learn and practice self-reliance on their own.
Yeah, don't skip the practice. That's basically what the outline is. And so, yeah, that's good. Good advice. All right, so let's talk 133. If you had a couple of days to do 133 and 134, let's just look at 133. The curriculum breaks it down 2 ways. Part A is preparing for the Savior's return. Part B is, what do we learn about Jesus about his return? What do we learn about attributes about Christ with what we learn about his return, right? Do you guys immediately, just as teachers, thinking about this as a teacher, is that how you would break down 133? What would you do? What would you focus on, Mason? That what would be the meat of this section?
Yeah, I think it's important to know where it comes from and to pay attention at the date there, that as they're getting ready, we're kind of skipping timelines again. And so unless you point that out with your students, they're just going to think you're a Nauvoo. And as they're getting ready to produce the Book of Commandments, which is the first iteration of the Doctrine and Covenants that never quite makes it to publication because the press gets destroyed, Joseph Smith attaches this to the Book of Commandments as an appendix, and it's kind of like the revelatory manifesto for the Restoration. It's kind of this grand sweeping thing that is public facing. It's telling the world what to expect, what to prepare for, and it draws heavily from the book of Isaiah and the book of Revelation. There's a lot of Isaiah and Revelation quoting going on, which those are notoriously complicated books to try to read and interpret for somebody in 2025. And so I think that's a fine way to break it up. The first thing I'll say about how they broke it up is students are always interested in the second coming.
Right.
They're it's the thing that everybody, whether it's because someone in their family is super into conspiracy theories about it, or they're just like afraid of it, or whatever. And look, there's going to be some parts in 133 that are going to be a little hard to interpret, and so I think adding in the focus in that second part on focusing on what this reveals about the character of Jesus Christ, if you do that right, that's exactly the way that we should focus on preparing for the second coming. So, but the first part of it is you got to realize that this is called apocalyptic literature, right? It's
Right.
not apocalypse
End
like
of
zombie
times type stuff.
apocalypse. Yeah, but like the word apocalyptic means revelation, like the revelation of God's whole plan. Um, this is why the book of Revelation is called Revelation. But it's going to use symbols to talk about really dramatic things. Some of these things might literally happen, like, the sea might dry up or the rivers of the wilderness so that the fish die and stink. I mean, we could think of like what that could look like. But maybe the better question in interpreting all these is, what does this say about God's power, God's intention? What's the overarching plan that he's trying to accomplish with all these things? Is he just trying to flex on the fact that he controlled the weather, or is he trying to do something with everything that he's doing? And the answer is he's trying to gather Israel,
Right.
which is the point of this whole section, is the 10 tribes, the tribe of Judah, and the Gentiles, how they all weave together.
It's probably just with that like framework in mind. Please don't let verses 24 through 29 be any kind of central part of your message. Whether these are reality or figurative, it's probably not important. The fact that all of the earth is going to be brought into one place and will not be divided, and a
Well,
highway thrown up in
let me
the
take that
heaven.
real quick.
Go ahead.
So our impulse is to say, okay, so the continents are going to come back together, right? I've heard that
Right.
before in church. You guys have heard that before in the church. Or what's probably more likely is he's talking about the people who have been scattered to the four corners of the earth
Which is
being
literally what
brought
he's been
back
talking about.
together in one, right? A highway
Right.
being cast up in the great deep. Imagine, now we've seen that happen in covenant history before, but imagine the impossibility of crossing an ocean without resources. I live in the middle of the ocean. It's if I didn't have the know-how to get off, it would feel quite isolating. In a moment of hopelessness, the Lord will make a way. That's the principle. That's what's being taught there. And we're not
Right.
being asked to pinpoint a certain historical moment or a future moment of what it would look like. We're being asked to say, what is this revealing? And in the barren deserts, there shall come forth pools of living water, right? Where you have no source of hope for either rescue or survival, I can bring forth those source. I am the source of living water, right? That's how you interpret those things.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you've got, 1950s style academic or I would even say church leaders in those long ago decades, I would highly recommend not using those quotes and using as fresh and current a quote as possible to
Stick
help
to
your.
President Nelson. You're gonna be led correctly.
Literally, I couldn't go through section 133 without thinking, man, President Nelson probably spent a lot of time in this section.
Totally.
Like everything he spends time focusing on seems to come out of this. So Ryan, what are your thoughts with this conversation? As a
I
teacher,
have
what are you focusing on? Like, what are you thinking?
I echo what you guys have been saying. I think we've probably said this in the past at the warning, and this is for section 134 as well. Is let's just not be weird.
Yeah,
Let's just
well, that'll be a different type of warning, but
it's a
very
different kind of
similar,
weird,
right?
but there's like these embedded, Mormon mythologies that exist, and so we want to stay current with what current leaders are teaching, and so I really do kind of jive with how the curriculum is approaching the section 133. Um, and I think the first lesson I like, as far as the hook goes, to ask your students to quote one of our Doctrine and Mastery references from last semester just without any warning, and just kind of and just kind of lead them through that thought process of, you show up for school and you're just immediately met with this pop quiz that you've had no preparation for. What are your emotions? Right? Versus the time that you have been supremely prepared to take an exam, and how much more, dare I say, enjoyable was the test when you just like, I know the answer to that one. I know the answer to that one. And like, I'm done, hand it in, and you just leave with this absolute confidence, right? And so I love that that's the focus, because I agree with Mason. That's what section 133 was, the appendix, where section 1 was the preface, right? So is there a way to kind of look at both of those sections and kind of compare? All right, so if a preface is trying to tell us what the book of commandments is about, right? The weak and simple, and prophets are going to speak to you, and we're going to hearken and listen. Well, then what does an appendix do? Right? An appendix is about, okay, here's what was kind of alluded to throughout these revelations. Now I'm going to put it to you in one document. Here's all these things. And I think this concept of preparation, Elder Bednar's talk in General Conference was like, what's going to make judgment, what is going to make the difference in judgment between something pleasing and something dreadful? And it's our amount of preparation going into it. And so if we can kind of get our students in that mindset going into it, then the first part of the lesson, I just like all the activities there. Let's go through this and let's just identify the action items. Right? This is very much, okay, let's pick one of these things that's going to help us prepare. And what is the Lord telling us? And what is he promising us? Like, let's go through that mental exercise. It's
I
almost
mean,
how does scripture
the whole
exercise.
first 20 verses is just full of those, right? You're go ye out, gather, awake, arise, watch, right? You
Yeah.
got you go through all of those and look at what he's actually asking them to do. It's full
36
of
through
those
40
action
is
words.
all about gathering of Israel. Like, super super relevant, because that has been prophetic priority. And then obviously the second part of it, let's focus on the character. Is Jesus literally going to show up wearing red, or is that teaching us something about who he is? Yes, he could show up in red. And I like the activity there as well. Like, let's find our favorite images of Jesus' second coming, and let's just talk about the character, and who is it that we're preparing to receive.
Yeah, I
There's
love it.
really there's a lot of allusions to the parable of the 10 virgins, which was recently really quoted in General Conference. I think it was last conference, not
Last
just
conference. Yeah.
yeah. And then there's that President Nelson quote where it says something along the lines of like, the most important thing going on in the world today, right? And I think we might sleep on how important that is to really help our students catch a vision of and catch a testimony of, because there's a lot of things that are louder in the world today, right? And a lot of those things that are louder are anxiety inducing, or they cause doubt or fear or
The
contention.
opposite of peace, right?
Yeah. And frankly, like, a lot of those things can also be spun out as signs of the second coming. We become hyper focused on them. In a past life, I used to ride a motorcycle, and there's this thing that happens when people don't want to hit something, but that they focus on it and they end up hitting it. Um, and in a similar way, we can do that with when we talk about the second coming. We have become accustomed to talking about the second coming, focusing on the things that we don't want to have happen. And so everything that's catastrophic in the world, even though mortality in and of itself is just catastrophic, right? But every time something catastrophic happens to the world or something that we don't understand, we interpret it as a sign of the second coming, as opposed to lining up with living prophets, matching their tone, matching their language. What are they focused on, and do we see the vision that they see? Because President Nelson, he did not feel like he was anxious about the second coming. He felt like he had purpose working directly toward that goal. And I think, like you said, it's like I was reading the same thing. I was like, oh, President Nelson must have loved 133. And so, yeah, so I think we've had sections like this in the Doctrine and Covenants before. Ryan mentioned something really briefly. It's kind of like a how to read scripture section. It's a great way, especially going into Old Testament next year, where we're going to need to be doing some of this. This is a great training opportunity going into next semester.
You know, one of the things I'm looking at this is like, how do I approach starting this? There's two things that kind of stood out to me when I was reviewing this in preparation for our discussion. Number one, I find it really interesting that Malachi is quoted at the very beginning and at the very end of this section, right? Like you start off the bat with the Lord who shall suddenly come to his temple, right? You start off with Malachi 3, and then you end with for the day cometh that shall burn as an oven, and all the proud, yea, and all that do wickedly shall be stubble, and the day that cometh shall burn them up. It's almost as if he starts and ends with those two verses because they kind of are the tone for the section. You have calls to the righteous and calls to the righteous to gather in Zion, and calls to the righteous to flee and leave Babylon. It's like it's both parts of this. Christ is going to show up suddenly to his temple, and the day comes it's going to burn as an oven.
If he comes to the temple, we don't want to be in Babylon when that happens.
Right, exactly right. Well, and that would actually be my point. I think that would be my hook would be Zion and Babylon. And if we were to have a way that I could quickly, whether I have images ready to go that show depictions of what the city of Zion looked like, and then drawings or pictures or depictions of what Babylon looked like, and have a really, this is just the beginning hook, have a quick discussion about what we understand the city of Babylon to be and what the city of Zion could be, and using it as the analogy and the allegory that it's meant to be from these sections. Spend some time looking at why is it that as part of our preparation for the second coming, we are invited to gather and sanctify in Zion and go ye out from Babylon. And once we've done that, go and get other people to do the same thing. Leave Babylon, come to Zion. I find it interesting that in verse 25, the Lord said that he will stand in the midst of his people. There's a little callback to Enoch and his city, right? But I would start with understanding Babylon verse, and that's going to be helpful when we get to Old Testament anyway, having that discussion of the city of Zion versus the city of Babylon, what they represent, where we see these today, and then have that discussion about how that can help us prepare for the second coming.
And again, it doesn't, when we talk about, I'd rather, you don't want to be in Babylon when the Lord comes, right? Well, am I in Babylon now as a 15-year-old, right? Like I go to school every day. People swear every day. I see inappropriate things all the time. Stakes of Zion.
Right.
And the Lord makes that point. We're gathered in the stakes of Zion. That's what we're doing already. We're already on this project, right? And so there's nothing in here that that is we got to wait until this happens before we actually start doing the plan. This was published in 1831. They were doing the plan way back then. And so it's just a matter of reinforcing what our prophets are asking us to do.
Establishing stakes and constantly gathering to them was literally what Joseph had been doing his entire life. And so we're just continuing that same tradition of establishing stakes of Zion, gathering there, fleeing Babylon.
Stakes and temples all over the world. Right. That's what we're doing. All right, let's move on.
Switch gears. 134. Tell me your knee-jerk reaction is like
Context.
let's get the warnings out
Yeah,
first.
context matters here. That's
Context
right.
is important. So, just notice one thing right off the bat, that 134 is not a revelation. It was probably written by Oliver Cowdery, and
A
it's in the
declaration of
midst,
belief, right?
right, and it's in the midst of intense persecution of the saints. As the saints are now, we got to think about kind of like, especially if you lived through 9/11. Right after 9/11, there was a huge rise in Islamophobia in the United States, of a religious radical group that doesn't find themselves bound by the law, right? That's exactly from the early days of the church. That's how the saints were seen, is that they're going to come in and they're not trying to live as good neighbors, good Christian neighbors. And so if you think about, now I'm not saying 134 isn't scripture or it doesn't teach wise principles or principles of truth. This is much more similar to like a press release of what we would see today, than it is a traditional revelation in the Doctrine
And it
and
was actually
Covenants.
used that way post Missouri when Joseph goes back to Washington D.C. to seek redress for the atrocities. This is one of the documents that he reads to Congress to try to convince them to do anything. So yeah,
And so,
that's how it was used as well.
So it feels
so
more proclamation like.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
very Jacksonian government of the time, right? Separation of powers type of thing going on. They do, you'll notice a hyper focus on religious liberties, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, because that's the thing that's pressing the most. Um, but it's also the case that like the saints will go on into Utah and start to establish a government that doesn't tick these boxes, right? Like Brigham Young is the governor of the territory and the prophet, right? There is the ideas of separation between church and state become kind of useless both in Nauvoo and in Utah. And so, while like again, think of it like you're being attacked by, we have analogies today of groups that are identified, and whether fairly or unfairly, turned demonized as like, oh, you don't belong here for whatever reason because your values don't match ours. These are as close to the values of the American government in the 1830s as you can get, right? Is the idea. It's an attempt to try and hold the government accountable to its own values. Martin Luther King Jr. did the same thing. Like, we've come to cash the check that was written by Abraham Lincoln, by the Declaration of Independence, by the Constitution. Like, we have been promised that all men are created equal, and we have come to collect on that, right? And in a similar way, that the saints are identifying what are very publicly professed values in the United States at that time. And then they're saying, we're coming to collect because you're burning down our houses and you're not doing anything. The government's not doing anything to stop them. Right. And so there's some wise principles in it. There's even relevant principles in it to today's world. But like, in no uncertain terms, are we as teachers authorized to use our platform and calling to push our own political ideologies?
Yeah.
That was gonna be my warning statement, is
Yeah.
like, let's make sure we stick to the script here and not insert our own political views. We don't want to turn this into a political debate.
Yeah.
Yeah. It seems so. Just again, historical context. Joseph wasn't even around when they held this meeting. It was Oliver Cowdery and Sidney Rigdon that kind of ran this meeting, and it was Oliver who read this. Joseph was in Michigan, but he endorsed it in April of 1836. It's been included always. And, Brigham, they eventually realigned with the principles, eventually in Utah. They get there. There are really great civic lessons here that your students are probably going to latch onto, but it's not a civic lesson. And I do like how the curriculum focuses on religious freedom and what that means. I think we probably are going to have to understand that the vision of this document is actually pro pluralistic society. And that may be a shock to some people. Stay with the curriculum. You can't get in trouble.
Stay with the words of living prophets.
Right.
Yeah, if you have
Yeah.
any
Stay with
doubt
stay with
what President
Oaks.
Oaks feels about this,
Yeah.
go back and listen to his talk at the University of Virginia a couple
I
years.
was just gonna say we that talk doesn't get as much love as it probably should. When did he do that? We should probably put reference to that somewhere. But
I think that was 2021, 20. It was right at the time COVID was starting to
post-COVID,
kind of.
yep.
But yeah, if you want to hear like a prophetic statement about how to live in a pluralistic society and what his views are going to be as he leads the church moving forward, he was very instrumental in the Utah Compromise, and he was very instrumental in you can just even in the quotations from him here. We want it. This is very relevant because a lot of us were celebrating the fact that how great is it going to be to have a judge leading us when we're having to deal with kind of religious freedom kinds of things. Well, that's a two-edged sword, right? We can't religious freedom it to the expense of other areas. We live with lots of people, and how are we going to be peacemakers in that kind of an environment?
Yeah, one thing you'll realize if you really read that talk, instead of turning President Oaks into an avatar for whatever ideology you have, right, going into the last days, right? Like, actually go and read that talk. First of all, everything he writes is written very carefully, so it should be read with the same amount of effort and attention. But he's not an ideologue, and he isn't using his platform to push a certain partisan idea at all. He speaks very clearly, very directly, but it is driving at this. I mean, and it goes right hand in hand with what President Nelson taught, is that we're here to build bridges. That's that contention doesn't convince, right? And yeah, I think if you were to just read into either of those men's biographies, you'll see that reaching out across religious groups, across racial groups, across political groups is something that they had done for decades, and not just when the cameras are on them.
Yeah. A call out to the curriculum with that story about an African king who's like, hey, when I convert, I'm bringing my whole kingdom with me. And President Nelson's response was, that's not how this works.
Like, it's a nice sentiment, but
it's fantastic. If only, America could just become the Mormon nation, it would solve all our problems. It's not how this is supposed to work. And it's not how it's going to work in the millennium. And there's going to be some really interesting things that kind of play out with this. It could be good.
Yeah. This might be a great lesson to just go a little bit deeper into President Oaks's biography and what he's taught in the past as your students are getting to know a new prophet. It's kind of a great opportunity to incorporate some of his background. He was the kind of Chief Justice Warren's favorite law clerk, and you can just go and look at the Warren Court and some of the decisions that they were passed. He was a law professor at Chicago. He practiced there. You know what I mean?
He was a Utah Supreme Court justice. Right?
Yeah. So these are the waters that he wades in, right? And
he was actually in consideration under two different administrations to fill the Supreme Court vacancy.
So it could be a good, like there's relevancy in here. There's great stuff in here. But it could also just be a really great avenue to go deeper into President Oaks's bio and let him get to know the prophet.
Yeah, it's good stuff. All right. I feel like I think we solved the world's problems just now in 30 minutes. That was pretty great.
Dang, that's all it took.
That's all it took.
You're welcome, everybody.
Boil it down. Read the scriptures and follow the curriculum.
Yeah, there we go.
That's the solution.
and words of living prophets. And to be honest, there's plenty of resources on religious freedom that has been the church's messaging over the past several years, and the curriculum does good. It pulls some of that resources, so do that.
And the topics and questions, there's all sorts of stuff there.
But we should have a banner across the video that says, "Don't make it weird." Just leave it at that.
I don't care who your parents voted for.
That's right. And it doesn't matter who President Oaks voted for, because that's always a question that comes up.
Love it. Okay, teachers, enjoy it. Again, we're coming to the end. Keep on keeping on. If you need anything, reach out to your coordinator. Pay attention to the back office stuff, your attendance, your readings, assessment stuff. Credit's going to be a thing that we're going to focus on here in the next couple of weeks. So start looking at that. Okay.